Okay, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Jason Gumpert and we're here today to talk about leading a digital marketing assessment with Dynamic CRM. And here to take us through the discussion is Dan Griffin. He is Microsoft Channel Sales Director at IBM. Dan's also a returning speaker for us and we're really glad to have him with us today. So as we get started, I just want to add that we do invite you to add your feedback and ask questions during Dan's presentation. He will leave time at the end for questions, and you can use the Q&A block that you'll see on the right side of the webcast session panel to ask those questions. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome Dan Griffin.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone for taking some time today to attend our webinar about what's your score in Q4, leading an end-of-the-year digital marketing assessment, specifically with Microsoft Dynamics CRM. And as Jason shared, my name is Dan Griffin. I'm Channel Sales Director at IBM for our Microsoft practice when it comes to marketing. And one of the things we're going to spend some time today on is talking about how you can incrementally over the next several months, and you can even use these tips and tricks and assessment guides into the next year and the foreseeable future to shape the way either you're doing marketing or if you're a partner that your clients are working through marketing and marketing automation and really become more intelligent and more analytical, but also take decisive action and always be thinking about what that customer experience is like. But specifically today being September 30th, what we want to focus on is what can I do? And Jason, I'm having trouble moving this forward. There we go, just caught up. With one day left in the third quarter, tomorrow starts a whole new ballgame. Now, if you're a partner and you might be aligned to Microsoft's fiscal calendar, that means that you're ending the first half of your year, which is an excellent time to really think about your marketing efforts. So just to use a typical sports reference, oftentimes a game plan starts early in the season or even before a game. And then as this game, and in this case, a four-quarter sporting event occurs, as you get to the second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, teams always take time to understand what they're doing. But the start of the fourth quarter is very important to the players because it's really critical to finish any game strong. Or in our world, you want to finish the fourth quarter of your business year incredibly strong. Certainly, we would love for all things to continually to be an up and to the right arrow, but if you're in a management position or if you're in a delivery type position or a sales position, we all know that the end of a quarter, be it the first or fourth, incredible pressure starts to come down in a marketing and sales organization to continue to close, whether you're B2B or B2C. So what we want to focus on is how do we finish strong and how do we assess where we are to make that happen. So the first thing we're going to talk about is really think about taking a break, assess how you're doing so far. What have you done right? What have you done wrong? It's important to understand not just feel or opinion, but metrics. And then you want to isolate and agree on the strengths and weaknesses of your team, or in our example, within a particular game. So oftentimes we advise our clients to think not just about what they're doing for the next quarter or the next month or the next week, but also understand where they came from and what are the things that they can move the dial or change, because we shouldn't be afraid of change, to accelerate our strengths to cover our weaknesses. And then finally, when we identify those strengths and weaknesses, we want to develop a game plan to improve and finish. And this is important because in a sporting event, there are very telling markers along the way, such as the final score and all the statistics that go with a sporting event. The same should be true as you leverage your marketing organization or as you advise marketing organizations on how to be successful. So we recommend, just in general, as we walk into these 7 items that we're going to talk about from a fourth quarter assessment, really think about your calendar. Think about where you are. Think about where you want to be. But get into a regular routine to walk through these 7 items at various points in your year. Things like data cleanliness. Things like your target market, things like my social reach or my ability to penetrate a certain content model, or what technology am I using and is it being utilized correctly. Plan your year out, and specifically now in individual quarters, plan when you're going to do that assessment. So with that in mind, again, we're going to go back and understand that we have very specific markers we need to work on. We want to improve, and we want to finish our game strong. Don't feel like you need to do each one of these 7 digital program elements at the same time. Pick the ones that are most applicable to you or to your customers, and use an incremental approach to moving the needle. So for example, the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding your target market. Is it clean? Do you actually focus on the right target market? And this becomes a very analytical question, but you do need to define who your target audience is. Your target audience right now could be very different than the fiscal year Q1 when you sat down and had your initial marketing plan. You, through analytics, could decide that this specific target market suits a new product that we've delivered to the marketplace, and we really want to push there. Don't stray from those target markets once you put them in place, because the analytics should tell you those are the leads you need to nurture to become successful sales pursuits, ultimately resulting in either a purchase or a booking. Understand your goals. How much of the market have you captured? What do I need to do to engage them more? So often one becomes the other in this situation, where you might have done very strong in a certain portion of your market, but there are other aspects or other buyers within that market that you're not performing as well against. It's important to understand those personas, which we'll talk about in a few moments, and then understand how you engage with them. Stay the course in the sense that you're going to always go for your target market, but don't be afraid to tweak within reason without wildly expanding your target market to those folks you're trying to reach to. Now that makes a lot of sense from a target market perspective, because as marketers, we're always trying to speak to those either businesses or consumers that we need to sell something to. And that all starts from a marketing perspective with generating leads to provide to our sales team. But no longer is it just about generating leads from a web form or sending out a bulk email that will result in a wildly successful sales campaign. There's much more pressure on the marketer than ever before to approach marketing through multiple channels, which means a distributed pipeline, and convert that pipeline to marketing qualified leads for their sales team. First and foremost, as we talk about pipeline, ensure within your organization that you're measuring not just the contribution, but the conversion. So a lot of times we see marketing organizations, especially those that aren't marketing automation savvy or haven't really gone all the way into a marketing automation technology and applied both the technology and the business practice to success, where they just focus on how did that lead get in the door, a simple lead source. That's just not good enough. So we always ask, can you measure marketing ROI? And that is not just source, but that's also influence. How successful are these incremental steps in my marketing campaign or my marketing strategy to a calculatable ROI by engagement? And then as I start to break that down into a smaller area, what % of each pipeline stage did marketing contribute to? And again, this is not just about lead source, and this is going to be a theme today. It's about influence. Your lead might not have been generated by marketing. It could have been from a customer service person who pushed one of their friends to look at one of your products, or a relationship that a salesperson has in the B2B arena that brought one of their former customers with them. But what is critically important is how are we influencing along the way? And John, if I continue to break up, we do have a relatively small audience. Please let me know, and hopefully this is getting better. I'm trying to hold the mic closer to my mouth. And then, of course, we want to be able to understand our metrics. So sometime, in a previous life, I was a CRM consultant, and we oftentimes found organizations would have issues with wanting to adjust, tweak, or change their stages. And I want to be clear about something. It's okay to change your stages. In fact, you should really think about what your funnel looks like. We will be talking pretty soon about an expanded funnel or the hidden pipeline or funnel. Do the labels make sense to your individual groups? Again, don't be afraid to change. Make it relevant to your business. Most importantly, understand in your pipeline where you're losing people within that cycle. So from the time someone enters the marketing funnel to the time that you move them through a deciding or a decision-making standpoint, you need to understand where people are dropping out and where marketing can come in with all of the great technology, data, and reach, and help ensure that we start to at least stave off some of that elimination. It's important to understand your customer journey during this pipeline discussion. We always recommend that from the minute a lead enters the funnel until they come out the end of the sales cycle, which of course is not the end of the customer experience, but these are very measurable pieces. We want to timestamp at a regular interval, just like we talk about a marketing calendar, where folks are in that buying cycle. So Big Scary Cranium is a client of ours, or is a partner of ours here at IBM, and they're very good at talking about the hidden sales cycle. That point in the sales cycle where marketing is really, really important, but they haven't quite entered into your opportunity management, or they're not visible to you as a marketer or a salesperson. There's a continuing stat, and the numbers move up and down a little bit, but by and large, 57% of the purchase decisions that are made by buyers are done long before they intentionally engage, and I use the word intentionally, quite specifically, with someone from your company. We are much more educated than we've ever been before. I think all of us will attest to doing this exact behavior while we are on the internet, doing our own level of shopping. I'm just going to clear a screen here. And I think it's also important, where are people stuck? So we're going to talk about behaviors here in the future, but as I look at these hidden cycles, some of these folks in your discovery cycle or in your comparison cycle, they might be anonymous to you because they haven't provided a name or an email address. But you'll still notice where they're stuck if you're leveraging marketing technology, especially from a digital perspective, because we can capture IP. We can start to drop cookies. So it's important to think about those digital aspects of your customer journey as well. And most importantly, as a marketer, how do I accelerate them through the funnel? How do I identify personas to pull them into that late purchase cycle or the actual sales cycle where they're physically engaged or intentionally engaged with your organization? It makes a lot of sense, and Big Scary Cranium does a great job of this. And also CRM partners do a very good job of this as well, documenting that customer journey, because it's not at the end of the day just about Salesforce automation. In fact, that term should start to be loosened from our vocabulary from a marketing and sales perspective, and it's really just relationship management with marketing and sales in this together. But understanding the customer journey, map it out, make assumptions, and with that map and your metrics, you'll be able to come in and point specifically to a potential problem based on loss in funnel or email unsubscribed. These things are really important. You can likely already do that within your sales cycle, the actual engaged sales cycle, but I would really emphasize that you map out your customer journey. And I think it's important that you think about your customer journey from different personas. And in a few minutes, we'll give an example of what that looks like. So what's your pipeline math? This is really interesting, and the first time that I'd kind of walked through this math, it was downright scary. And I was working through a similar solution with a client of mine when I was implementing Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Now, this assumes that you're not adding folks to your database, which is likely untrue. But let's assume for a second that we have 500,000 subscribers, and we email them 4 times per week. That's a pretty big number. They're getting over 200 emails from us annually. Now, let's say that just 0.25% unsubscribe. In the grand scheme of things, as you run the math out, you've just lost half of your database. So it's not good enough to just email and not pay attention to the metrics that any marketing automation solution provides, at least top-line marketing automation solution provides you. And again, you're always going to be adding to your database of potential targets, but your known targets through this cycle, those small incremental decreases can have a severe impact when we're talking about the right side of the decimal point in terms of moving your sales cycle along and being targeted from a marketing perspective. Always inspect, if we're thinking about email, unsubscribes, how that is happening, and think about things like A/B testing to ensure that you're being more relevant and you're starting to react to the unsubscribes. You'll never be able to stop them, but being able to react and put metrics and take those metrics that come from your marketing automation technology and put them into action is critically important. The third thing you can do is really start to look at your content. And specifically in the net new side, are you answering your prospects' questions? So I'm not going to walk through this entire eye chart. We'll certainly make this content available to you if you'd like, and I'll provide my email address after we're done with our webinar here. But think about where you are in your stage and the content that you have. But in the middle, where it says critical question, information needs, it's really important to think about what people, your personas, and again, that middle column can be different by persona, what they're looking for in each stage of their buying cycle. A highly educated person about your vertical or about your industry is going to want different information available to them than someone that is net new to your vertical or your industry. That can be incredibly difficult to figure out, but you should plan for it, and you should make it easy for both of them to find the information that they're looking for, which of course starts to come down to a framework for content. Build your content library. What's important is also to leverage technology that can manage your content library. As I look across the top of this slide, I see three different personas, and let's call them an engineer, professional services, and operations person. And they're concerned about very different things within the same organization. So you can see how personas become important in the buying cycle. We've moved past the day where a procurement officer is the only person responsible. Oftentimes, if I think about B2B sales, many folks are involved with influencing and decision-making capabilities, but they're all looking for different things. Or if we think about software, what's in it for me? How am I successful? You need to take content and cater to them to make them successful, or answer the what's in it for me question. And of course, these questions change based on the vertical that you're in. But it's pretty easy to break these content pieces down into three easy categories. The engagement side, so how do I bring them in the door? Educate, how do I keep them around? And convert, how do I push them over the edge to make them purchase or lock them in as a customer or an advocate? And again, those are all different for different folks. I can't stress enough how important it is to understand your buying personas, and likely it's 3 to 5 different buying personas within each organization. It's not 1 to 2, but you certainly don't have to go out to 10 to 12. And the larger your organization is, the more complex that might be. But it's even true for B2C marketers. And in this example, we're thinking about a beginner, a hobbyist, and a professional skier. And you want to be able to provide them different content at the relevant time. And this comes down to leveraging technology as well, where you're using your content and delivering it based on that experience the person is expecting to have. So a professional skier or a hobbyist, someone that is skiing or has an annual pass to a particular area, you're going to talk to them differently than someone that is coming around and admittedly a beginner. Again, this is about data collection, but you want to make sure that your content is served up specifically to folks, and the experience that they are having is indicative of what they expect. I shared this example the other day. I like to play a lot of golf, and I take a similar approach when I go out and try and educate myself on equipment that's coming out new for golfers. And I had stopped purchasing from a particular online site because they just weren't catering to what was important to me. I'm very brand loyal, and they were serving up brands that I hadn't purchased before. And I'd also indicated that I was only interested in a couple brands in my profile. And they were basically marketing to me more in general, trying to push a product, than trying to persuade me to look at a new product. So I stopped purchasing products from them. And it's pretty powerful because then it's that old adage where if you have a really good experience with a company buying something, you're likely to maybe tell 10 people. But of course, if you have a bad experience, and this holds true with our social relationships as well, I'm going to tell 100 people. So always keep that in mind. So when it comes to content, as you lay out your matrix of content, think about where your gaps are, prioritize your gaps, and those gaps need to be prioritized based on your personas and the personas you're most successful with, or the personas or you're very successful in certain personas and you want to work to bring other buying personas up to a more reasonable level of success. Think about those gaps. Only you can prioritize them, but you must prioritize them and fill them. This often involves lots of folks. The same question should be answered when it comes to retiring content. How many times have we all read stale content? Nothing bugs me more than when I do a search on the internet, and this is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about. It happened to me last night. I was searching for something, and I got a lot of results, and they were from like 5 and 6 years ago that just were entirely not relevant to me. And I thought about this conversation we're going to have today and how infuriating or frustrating it must be when I find content that I think is accurate by a company I'm trying to purchase something from or be educated about, only to find out it's inaccurate, not up to date, or any other host of things that can go wrong. Just like we talked about updating internal processes like sales pages, you shouldn't be scared to retire content or update content. It doesn't need to continue to exist if it's no longer relevant to your buying personas. Let's talk about engagement, because this is often one where you can very quickly move the needle within a marketing organization. And a lot of it has to do with behaviors. And I'm going to share a definition on behaviors just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what this means. So behaviors are digital breadcrumbs that prospects and customers leave behind as they traverse the buying process. That model can, of course, be expanded to include a customer exploring your portal or a knowledge base, if that's something that you have. But it's crucial that you're capturing them and making them actionable. So we talked earlier about those folks that are anonymous, that are visiting your website. Again, web intelligence is really important. Now, that's a subset here of the engagement model, but it's important to capture those engagement behaviors where someone is anonymous. So if you think about someone has hit your website 5 or 6 times, and then they came through from a tweet that you put in place, which all of a sudden identifies them, but maybe only by their Twitter handle. But then I come back through and fill out a web form and give you my name and my email address. To take all of that previous inspection behavior, right, something where I'm trying to educate myself, that 57% of the buying process, I as a buyer am hoping you don't know, pull all that together, you become much more educated. Think about all the different ways that we can engage with as a buyer with companies, or put it in the marketer's seat and think about all the different ways they feel like they need to not only capture behaviors, but also manage the brand from offline to video to web behavior to email behavior and custom behaviors that you might have personally. And this starts to extend, if you take social, this can extend across all. You can think about the different ways they're using a mobile app. These are the different behaviors. People are telling you what they're looking for. They're giving you more information. It's really important to capture that. This applies in the B2B scenario, specifically to help move that sales cycle along. It really can help you in the B2C scenario, defining your personas and targeting those personas that are going to be best utilized to drive more revenue or lift revenue. And again, I won't read through all of this, but there's likely more than 50 different behaviors, and oftentimes it's even more than that, where you're seeing prospects and customers interact with you as a company depending on what you do. What I think is interesting is, we talk about this from a marketing perspective, but we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the post-purchase process. So once they're a customer and once they're in support. So if I look to the bottom right-hand corner, I see large purchase. Marketing folks are always looking for more data once someone gets inside to provide that uplift, to upsell and cross-sell. So making sure that your ERP or point of sale data, depending on the vertical that you're in, if you're B2B or B2C, how does that work and help supplement back into the top of the funnel so we can start to educate folks? And not just from an education perspective, but if I go back to my personal story about the golf website I no longer go to, if they would have integrated the back end of my purchases and showed me just down the right sidebar the newest products from the particular vendor that I was still obviously buying, or at least religiously buying, things would have been different. I probably would still be purchasing things from their site. What it told me is they were quite disconnected, especially for a digital business. And it's important, and this applies to brick and mortar because that's really brick and mortar and digital, they're one at this point. So think about your large data as well to enhance the engagement process. And then finally, how are you measuring those behaviors? How are you using them? And what behaviors are most important to you? A common theme that we share is, even though we're going to give you a bunch of information where you can take action, be very specific about what you're looking for. Don't try and come up with an engagement model where you're measuring email, just start at the same time measuring email engagement and website engagement, web intelligence, and redirects to your site and web forms, and then also manage all these social pieces. Pick two. Start there. Incremental success. If you're a CRM partner or a CRM user, the most successful CRM deployments are all based on incremental success. Finding a metric or a measurement, understanding the target, that can be internal. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sales number, and working to improve that post phase one deployment. And one last thing that we'll talk about for engagement is really thinking about email. And I encourage you all to visit our website at silverpop.com. We recently released our 2014 email marketing metrics benchmark study. And what that is every year we do this study. It's all of last year's data. It's categorized into 14 industries across 14 countries from 3,000 brands. We get into the different regions, and I certainly won't read this, but it's incredibly powerful to see what folks in your industry are doing, what their percentages are, and how you stack up against other folks, either in your region, in your vertical, or in your typical engagement model. And it also provides definition, so I would encourage you, especially if you're either a marketer or someone trying to work with a client from a partner perspective, this will also help you kind of get up to speed on email, what those benchmarks are like and what those definitions mean, and how you can, just with a small change, again, we're talking to the right of the decimal point, not to the left. If you're changing something to up to the right of the decimal point, you're doing something good. So the last thing we'll say is, really think about your metrics, and then don't be afraid to change. I find it interesting where either from a CRM perspective or a marketing perspective, I hear often that folks say, well, we've always done it this way. Even though the metrics are saying something else, well, we've always done it this way. Now you're empowered, especially marketers, because they're so responsible for an increased budget with higher ROI, and they're really driving that customer experience versus just sharing the brand, that you have these metrics in place to adjust your game plan. Quite some time ago, I worked with a large telecommunications company, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that they weren't afraid to fire their bottom 5% from the customer base that were costing them money. They weren't afraid of losing them because they knew they weren't profitable. The only reason they could answer that question is because they had those metrics in place. So no matter what you do from an engagement perspective, please be prepared to at least have basic ROI in place. Don't hesitate to reach out to industry experts or marketing experts about how to define those metrics and best practices as well. So most of us are probably interested in the skills and technology piece, and likely that's where you think you can move the needle a little bit if you're a partner, and as a marketer, you're probably a little overwhelmed by the massive amount of technology that you have at your disposal. But this is how we get things done. So I think it's interesting that even though we see large numbers of organizations purchasing, leveraging, and really using marketing automation, specifically around email, only 5% of those B2B organizations have a formal internal systematic marketing training program. So what that means is, even though they might even be doing something great from a marketing perspective, they're not teaching the others what they're doing. They're not sharing a global message. And things start to fall apart pretty quickly. And it kind of comes back to the sales and marketing together. Sales should be very in tune to the marketing plan, and they should be trained as part of the engagement model. And there's a lot of reasons for that to be true. You need to mine the marketing automation skills gap. Education is important. Technology is easy to use, but it's funny that it's unfortunate that 75% of companies, their marketers learn through trial and error when there in fact are best practices documented. There are industry experts that can help them. And a lot of it comes back to a lack of reach from a services industry. So if you're a CRM partner, how do you help marketers be better? And marketers are traditionally very closed in, and while they're open to their team's input, at least in my experience in delivering CRM, they're not so open to others. And trying to build that collaborative team approach is pretty important. Those organizations that are open to sales and marketing working together are the ones that are wildly successful. I would encourage you to really go out to the Serious Decisions website, another partner of ours, and just kind of read through their methodology and what they're all about. You'll find a lot of things there that just help you talk more intelligently around putting these two, hugely important days of email specialists and database managers and PR planners, and we just go hire one large agency. Now that some of those might be true for really, really large enterprises, but we're seeing things be much more, I think the best way to describe it is specific in nature, but specific from a business process, because if I look down the left of what's hot, these are business processes. They're not tactical things that I'm doing. So demand gen, for example. Demand generation's responsibilities aren't just making outbound phone calls, but those folks also responsible for demand gen need to help with nurture marketing and that campaign design. What is it like for net new acquisition? How do we manage campaigns at the beginning? And I'm going to skip back to my previous slide to go to the bottom example of boutique agencies. And this is indicative of what's happening in the marketing technology space as well, where we're starting to see, including here at IBM, where we have Silverpop, which is a marketing automation platform, in fact, multiple marketing automation platforms that serve the Dynamics CRM community. But we also, in our Experience One group, which is our marketing software group, have a resource management tool called Unica. And we have a mobile platform called Xtify. And we have several other platforms that help with analytics and social listening. And in fact, we have the most robust marketing offering to date. But it's important because not everyone needs each one of these items out of the gate. The same thing occurs with boutique agencies. If your business plan or your business relies heavily on a mobile strategy because you're selling to folks in a specific place. So I think about an amusement park, and especially a park like a Disney or parks that are run by Hershey Family Entertainment, where in that park they're trying to do geolocation marketing through SMS to your phone. So what that means is I'm walking around this location and they happen to know that I just checked in at, let's call it a particular ride, and I've also part of their loyalty plan, I can SMS that person with, oh, hey, I know you're here at the park, and I know you just went on this ride. Did you know that this show is starting? Oh, by the way, when I walk out of that show, I'm going to be forced to walk through a retail store that is all about that show. Those are things that companies like Disney and Hirsch and Family Entertainment do really, really well. And that can expand from a brand loyalty and planning perspective into any vertical that we're talking about here. So again, getting back to the demand generation example, this is not just about telemarketing or outbound. This is about customer engagement. Marketing ops is changing dramatically. This is not just about supporting an email marketing program. This is about supporting automation. It's more about the data that you use. Without quality data, what do you do? So I would absolutely advise and support, and I know we do at Silverpop, looking at the data that you have, engaging data experts if you don't have them on staff, making sure the data you're leveraging both from a segmentation perspective and an analytical perspective is spot on. Think about how that interacts with CRM. Think about that from a social perspective. These things all tie together now. They are no longer siloed. You can't afford to have them siloed. They must be aligned. And here's a simple example, and we won't spend any time on this, but think about your technology scorecard. And I would include down the left-hand side really that budgeting and resource management as well. Help your marketers, or as a technology partner, explain to marketers that after automation, you really want to understand kind of that resource management and budgeting. And again, at IBM, we have an incredible tool called Unica that is being moved to the cloud to come down to the SMB and mid-market space, something that'll be pretty important to those folks moving forward. Don't be afraid to upgrade your skills. Take time. We all get too busy doing our day-to-day. Just like we talked about our marketing calendar, help your marketing team, or if you're a Dynamics partner, help your consultants upgrade their skills so they can talk to marketers, or so that marketers can go learn about either the latest and greatest in technology, or go listen to someone that's really successful at a conference in your industry and bring those practices home and apply them to your business. But don't wait, and we encourage this at the individual level, because if you're in an operational role in a marketing department, it's highly unlikely that your leadership is thinking about what your skill set needs to be in a couple of years. We recommend just a little, my tip is think about your career trajectory and the growth model you want to take. Mobile, it's here to stay. It's going to become more and more integral in your marketing strategy. These messages have to be mobile friendly. They won't get read. That's a fact. This is not just about responsive design, but it also comes back to when you engage mobilely. And do you have technology that allows you to engage mobilely? It's really important. When we talk about responsive design, that's the ability for a particular piece of content to be displayed in a certain way on a certain device. But beyond that, it's also about understanding the consumption of your buying personas and targeting them where they're going to buy from or where they're most likely going to read from. So two common classic buying personas. We've all heard that, and I'll share my age, I'm 39 years old, and so I'm pretty far detached from what the college lifestyle is. Email is really non-existent from a college perspective, a college student perspective. But if I'm a retailer trying to reach that target market, I need to be able to communicate to them on a mobile perspective. They're going to want a short URL from one of their social sites to go to a very simple but personalized website, or they're going to want that SMS message to be delivering something that's of value that forces them to click through to a call to action. So think about your buying personas and the individual campaigns you're working through, and think about it not just from a buying persona, but you have to think about where their consumption is coming from as well. And lastly, the seventh thing you can do is really think about social. This maybe, I would argue that between content and social, those are the two items that can be really overwhelming for folks. Marketers are becoming much more savvy from a social perspective. Technology is trying to get there. One of the things that's difficult for marketers is they would love to have actionable social data. That's really, really hard to get to, and it can be really expensive. But you need to participate in social in a different manner at this point. How do you actively participate? Again, we recommend incremental focus. Pick a couple social channels, focus on them, assign resources. Think about that social network that you're working through or that social area. And again, this could be we're not just talking about Twitter and Facebook. We're also talking about social forums for industry. We're also talking about blogs. We're also talking about places where people go and just vent. So think about the places that socially apply to your vertical, and then pick the two that make the most sense and focus on them. Measure your conversations and followers. And it's really important because it doesn't just show that you're gaining more followers, but you can also start to see those folks that lead. You can also start to see who's engaging from a conversation perspective and tie those back to buying personas. Number 5 is, I think, really important, especially from a brand management perspective. There's so many places where consumers can go talk poorly about your brand, but you have control over your blog or syndicated blog. Encourage your team to blog. We, of course, understand this comes with different rules of engagement because you're asking, there's no way one person or two people from a marketing department can handle the blogging you would need to do, mostly because people want to read from people they want to buy from. So I personally might want to read a blog from a product expert in a particular area of golf. I don't want to hear it through the lens of a product marketer. I want it from a consumer. So it's okay to go out into the industry and find folks that will blog for you as well. But it's important because you can control the public persona. And then, of course, from a posting or tweeting perspective, any marketing automation tool that's worth anything can help you schedule those tweets. But please don't make this your sole avenue. Don't treat this like most companies are treating email marketing, where it's kind of a batch and blast and it's not nurture. Take email, take social, combine them together with web intelligence, build nurture programs. So let's just review 7 things that you can do. Work on your target market, inspect what that looks like, make sure that you have the right formula in place and you're measuring. Understand and timestamp where you are on a routine basis with your pipeline, critically important. Content, not only create it, but make it personalized for the buying personas that you have. Don't be afraid to tweak or retire content. Engagement, really think about how people are working with you, buyers from a behavior, not just the known, but inspect and understand the unknown. This comes back to the web intelligence conversation. Technology and skills, this is only going to accelerate. The technology side is only going to get more intense, which is going to be more difficult to understand. It's our job as technologists, and I say that from the IBM perspective, to make it easy, discernible, and actionable. But it's also your job to know what pieces of technology you need or your partners need or your customers need as a partner to be successful in the marketing arena. Don't neglect mobile. In fact, this relates back to buying personas. Speak to those buying personas where they need to be. This is not just about responsive interfaces, but it's also about the ability to interact at the mobile level. And social, be specific, and blog. Several examples of like blogging and real-time delivery of tweets that provide call to action can change the face of your brand. So just a couple more slides, and I'll come back and look at the questions here in a moment. This is a little different tip because depending on where you are in your financial cycle, you could be very well coming into your budgeting season. If you are, take a lot of what we said and table the change for later, but absolutely go back and look for your ROI. If you don't have the metrics in place that we described for the 2 or 3 items that you would take action on, put those in place now so a quarter from now you have some relevant data, or you provide your clients with relevant data to make decisions on. But start your evaluation, no doubt. Don't lose sight of your objective. Think about yourself as that sports team. Assess, understand where you need to make change, be open and honest with where you need to make change, and then develop that game plan to make that change. Really driving for each quarter, not just the fourth quarter. And so just closing thoughts that you can read as we work through this piece. I think, again, there's a lot of things that marketers can do. We've outlined 7 items that are important. The things that are very easy to put in place are documenting behaviors. The hard things are spending the time and taking folks out of their normal job process to define that customer process. Take a hard look at buying personas to apply across the different types of content and technology, social and mobile. But really think long and hard about how your business drives revenue. Prioritize your marketing efforts based on those revenue or loyalty measurements, and take action. So with that, I'm going to leave this slide up, and I apologize, this doesn't have my email address on it, but Jason, I believe I can be contacted through the MS Dynamics World site as a speaker, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And if you wanted to, even you could paste into the chat area there, to all attendees. You could just paste your email address in there. People can grab it that way too. I do want to just remind folks, you can enter your questions into the Q&A block that you see to the right. There was a question, about the slides, and I guess email is the best way to request those. All right, and just to kind of, I guess, reiterate why we're meeting today. This was really not about demonstrating the specifics of your product. Would you agree, Dan? Of your product platform?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. I think what we would like to do is really share these are all things that we've done with our clients. We're happy to take you through an individual demonstration of how this works within our platforms and how it relates to Dynamics CRM.
All right, great. One question here: in terms of engagement, what are some of your thoughts on specifics of an engagement model?
Sure.
Email lead scoring.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I think one of the things that was interesting that we've talked about a lot at Silverpop is the present step for marketers is really that nurture model. How do we deliver things omni-channel? And I think that comes down to the nurture programs. I was surprised to see that of folks that own of companies that own marketing automation platforms, only 64% are leveraging the nurture capability. And it's not that hard because you're likely already defining who do I email to when, and if they respond, I'm sending them to a web page. Think about your buying personas and walk through that cycle. Leveraging marketing automation platforms through their nurture programs is a great way to make sure that an individual doesn't have to sit and monitor and develop each piece. Of course, it takes a little bit more time up front, but marketers are being asked more and more, not just what's my return, but what's so-and-so doing and why is that valuable? And as you're able to put specific numbers on these steps in a nurture program, it can only help you both internally, but can also help you as you reach your client.
All right. Earlier in the session, you talked about the customer journey. Can companies successfully redesign the customer journey, reshape it as a result of these assessments?
Absolutely, and I think if I were to take these slides and think about the first thing that I should do if I'm starting from a marketing automation perspective or just marketing in general, the customer journey or buying personas would be the first thing that I would do. And then I would use it as my reference model and always change it based on the direction of my business and what my metrics are telling me. So for example, if within my buying, my customer buying cycle, I'm assuming that someone's working through these 3 different sales channel or 3 different sales stages in a pipeline, but I notice they're always getting, like 75% are getting stuck in the middle one. And it could be because of a particular action we're forcing them to go through, whether it's come online and register a product or register what you like. Don't be afraid to change that. It's important to be nimble because, as we've all likely proven, and we're willing to go buy other places. We're willing to go find something. You're not unique. And that's the message that's hard to hear, but the companies aren't unique. It's the experience you create that is unique to buy, and I think that that's critically important. So don't be afraid. I think the challenge is it comes back to metrics, and marketers are now kind of required, not kind of, but they're required to explain why they make a change, whereas before, let's call it 10 years ago, it's still a little bit more of an art form, or at least the perception of an art form. Now you can apply real numbers to steps and stages and change that customer buying cycle to something that is more appropriate to that persona.
All right, I'm going to make a last call for questions here. We have one more. This one's about accountability. Should marketers have metrics that they are accountable for hitting or for delivering on, and can you offer any examples?
Sure. I think that absolutely marketers should have accountability, and I can provide a lot of examples. Let's pick a few different examples that we have. Primarily, marketers are responsible for generating marketing qualified leads to the sales team. I mean, that's the general goal of a marketing department. And what is that overall value? You should know how many marketing qualified leads sales needs overall to convert into a defined revenue booking goal. So think about your funnel. Think about, what do I need to drive the business? That's our end of year goal, and explode that backwards. That's a very simple way to understand the power of marketing. Other things that I think are important to measure that we always encourage our clients through our services group to do is, again, think about not just that, where did the source come from, but ROI isn't always related to just that seminal event when someone became a lead, but it's often influenced, specifically influenced, by other steps along the way. So having metrics around things like white papers and webinars, and especially in the technology or the B2B space, where folks can educate themselves, can be a great way to understand who is going where, who's looking at what, and that might become a reheat in the sales cycle that you didn't realize was happening until you start to measure them. Does that answer your question, Jason?
Yeah, I think so. With that, we are at the end of our question queue, so we'll start wrapping up here. Folks, please do be on the lookout for a survey as you exit the session today. We really do appreciate the feedback. Dan, I want to say thanks to you for your time today.
No, I appreciate it, Jason. Thank you. We appreciate MS Dynamics World having us, and there's all sorts of incredible content on MS Dynamics World. I encourage you to go read that, and it's not just about technology. Technology kind of is what it is. Thought process, best practices, thought leadership. Spend some time out there if you have questions, and you'll likely find things that you didn't know. And I say that as I spent some time writing for Jason and team for a little while when I was in the CRM space, but the folks that interact in this community are truly industry leaders and experts in what they do.
All right, thanks for that. And with that, that concludes our session today. Thanks for attending, and have a great day.